please. Can I just thank you, Professor Gadgil, because for shifting the focus on the other capitals, because we've been talking in the past few days mostly about natural capital, and that too in an extractive manner. And I believe, having done 9 years at WWF, that it's ecosystems which sustain societies, which then create economies, and it's not the other way around. So thank you very much, Mrs. Shankar.
I'm going to talk about where I think our core values as India continue. There's continuity in the core values. We are talking of an epochal shift. But if you look at modern India, what are the core values which define us, which we adopted as part of our constitution? One is democracy. It was quite audacious when we adopted universal adult franchise in a developing country which was extremely poor and illiterate and with enormous social challenges at independence. I think the literacy rate was 15% or so. Life expectancy, 28 years for a woman, 32 years for a man. And the economy had absolutely stagnated with 0.5% growth for 50 years prior to independence. So you can see the magnitude of the challenges that India faced at independence. And in the teeth of these challenges, we adopted a policy of universal adult franchise and democracy. Now that core value continues to define India. We are a people governed by people whom we choose. Of course, there have been successes and there have been failures too in this process. We have broadened the basis of democratic participation enormously. The system of reservations that we started at independence for in the legislature, in the parliament, for marginalized sections, has led to their participation and accommodation within the political system and to their ability to shape political outcomes. Now, the kind of change that we have witnessed in this process is truly transformative, and in most societies would not have occurred without enormous bloodshed. And I think that has been one of the huge successes of our democratic process, that people fight for space within the democratic process and have been given a voice. I think the shortcomings are that free and fair elections, in a sense, are the core of any parliamentary system. And we have seen the increasing influence of money power, because this is a challenge. How do political parties fund themselves, fund elections within a democratic polity? And I haven't yet seen any country which has resolved this issue 100%. But they have all made incremental progress and strides towards reducing this. And I think for India, we have not even begun to grapple with it. So I think it is time for political parties to put this question of political funding on the table and to have a debate as to how best this can be addressed. Should we have state funding of elections? Should we have transparent auditing of political parties and of all contributions? At the moment, contributions below a certain level don't have to be disclosed. And a lot of funds which parties raise are basically said to be of small contributions, so the donors are not disclosed. There are many things which could be done to improve the democratic process and to address the issue of political funding in a democracy, which in many cases lies at the core of the issues of corruption that we face. The second is, I would say, a huge gap in democratic participation at the grassroots level. Because we have the center, we have the states, we have the village councils, and we have the panchayats and the municipal bodies. Now we have panchayat elections, we have elections to the municipal councils, but financial powers and delegation of resources to these bodies is not there. So you have a division of responsibility between the center and the states. We are moving towards institutional financing for the states through the Finance Commission, apportioning resources on the basis of certain agreed formula, less politics, more transparency, more institutionalization. But at the grassroots level, the states are reluctant to share powers with the local bodies. And I think until people at that level begin to have responsibility for the services, goods and services that they provide, there's a huge gap in democratic functioning, which I hope as we go along, we will begin to address. Where there is also continuity in terms of the idea of India as a pluralistic society. We have heard everybody speaking over the last several days. Mr. Patnaik said there's not one idea of India, there are many Indias. And actually, it's a miracle that we have been able to cohere 1.2 billion people with such a multiplicity of languages, 800 dialects, all the religions in the world, enormous divergence in ethnicities, in castes and so on, that we have been able to cohere as a nation. You know, in the early years after independence, there was always this debate, is India going to break up? Is India going to break up? And quite a number of people actually prognosticating that yes, India can't cohere as a nation, it's an artificial nation. But because of the space that we have given to the plurality of our being as a nation, that we have actually been able to cohere. I mean, if you take a look at what happened in Pakistan, it was because Pakistan, West Pakistan, was unable to accommodate the aspirations of East Pakistan for their own linguistic culture, for Bengali as a language, that the whole breakup of Pakistan began. And when Sheikh Mujib was elected as the leader of Pakistan, undivided Pakistan, West Pakistan was not willing to accept a leader from East Pakistan. So I think India's ability, you know, in fact, to have this diversity, to accommodate it, to give space to pluralism, even as we build ourselves as a nation, I think has been an enormous strength and is something which we need to cherish, to encourage, and to preserve. In terms of the goal of development, I think that there is continuity. We want to develop as a society. We want to develop democratically, which brings its own challenges. I think where there has been a shift in the economic paradigm within which we seek to develop. Because post-independence, we sought a paradigm which focused on redistribution. We were affected by the rise of social democracy in Europe, by the kind of settlements which emerged for the social welfare state, by Fabian socialism from the UK. So what we were doing in India was not very different from what was happening around the world. You had the New Deal in the US, you had under FDR, you had MacArthur in Japan post the war, bringing about land reforms which were still far more stringent than what India attempted post-independence. And you had the Labour Party in Britain post-war come to power on a platform of nationalization. I think in India, we expanded the state, tried to expand this redistributive model through regulation at a time when its limits were becoming visible. Our nationalizations took place in the 70s, and it wasn't yielding the results. So I think in 91, since then, we have had a shift in the economic paradigm within which we seek to develop. We have accelerated the growth rate to 8% or more for 4 to 5 years prior to the global economic crisis of 2008. We bounced back, and then we had, again, a slippage of growth. So the challenge for us, because we have so many people coming into the job market, is to accelerate growth, but to accelerate it with sustainable livelihoods, as Mr. Gadgil said. And quite often, there's really no dichotomy between the two. For instance, if you were to take a look at agriculture in Punjab, it has heavily drawn on groundwater resources. It's depleting groundwater resources. So the ability of that soil to sustain agriculture at this level will continue to shrink. Do we need to change the crops that Punjab is planting from basmati rice to something else, which is less water intensive? Do we need to shift to modern methods of irrigation which conserve water? Yes, and that would be the way in which we will also sustain the soil and the ability of agriculture to grow. So in many cases, there may not be a contradiction between growth and sustainability. But how we generate the jobs is going to be a challenge for us, because the growth we've had has created jobs in the IT and high-tech sectors where the educated people can find outlets. It hasn't created sufficient jobs at the bottom of the pyramid. So I think the focus of governance and political parties has to be on arriving at a compact to see how we can achieve this, because this is going to be our primary challenge. And then all the additional things that we need to do for this, including training our workforce so that they are deployable, changing social attitudes, because we have a kind of attitude towards physical work which is not conducive to development. I mean, I know people prefer to just go and stand in malls than to work in a factory or to do anything which involves physical labor, and we tend to look down on it. Now, if you do that, how are you going to build a modern economy? So change in social attitudes also towards women. If you continue to treat women, as objects and as people to be, suppressed and kept away from the public space, how are you going to develop? Because half your country is going to be left behind, and they are the ones who will shape the attitudes of their children. So what are the ways in which we can actually achieve growth with sustainable livelihoods, I think, is going to be the key challenge for the future. We need to try and bring about a compact to discuss these issues at greater length between all stakeholders, industry, politicians, bureaucrats, activists, and to see what kind of a consensus we can get to move forward. And finally, of course, improve governance. When we talk of reforms today, we quite often mean opening up the economy in some way, in some sector where there may be some segment of business interest. But we don't talk of actually improving our systems of governance at the grassroots, and that is, I think, where we need to concentrate reform now. The criminal justice system, you cannot have a situation where something like the Mumbai blasts takes 22 years to deliver justice, or the Upar cinema, and our judges will pontificate on any issue which is not directly under their jurisdiction, whether it's what the executive should be doing or what the legislature should be doing. But improving the functioning of and efficiency and impartiality of the justice system, which is a core foundation for building a nation, building a society, I think we haven't focused enough. So I'll end there. I think there are huge elements of continuity and core values which we need to preserve. There are shifts in terms of the economic paradigm within which we seek to develop. And there are shifts which external developments and technological developments are imposing upon us. We'll need to be very nimble-footed. We'll need to cohere, build more consensus as a society, rather than play antagonisms to actually move forward in this modern world, as I think we will be able to. Thank you.